Yeah, so you guys are the SL users, so you probably know what we're talking about. Clicking through things, bouncing around all over the place. Um, you'll see with Acumatica, it's a little bit more streamlined. You can basically go to one screen and drill through multiple screens, where before you had to open up multiple screens. So we'll be providing a little bit of insight into that, a little bit of show and tell. Okay, easy collaboration. If you have somebody in purchasing and they enter a PO and you need somebody to approve it. The old days, unless you had a third-party product, you'd basically have to get a hold of the AP person to find out who's approving this, or a manager who's approving this. With Acumatica, there are approval workflows. So data accessibility. So on the SL side of things, you've had access to data through Quick Query or through the Crystal reports with FRX or Management Reporter or all those type things, or direct access to SQL. Well, Acumatica kind of controls that direct access to SQL because that's a dangerous thing to do, but they provide something called GI, or General Inquiry. And that is a powerful tool that allows you not only to do quick query, look up data, call up specific filtered data or whatever, but it also allows you to do data massaging, data manipulation, and things like that. User level configuration. This is probably one of the best ones. So I'm an AP person. I'm in doing voucher entry, and down in my grid, I have like 10 columns that mean nothing to me. Or, boy, I'd love to have this column that's way out to the right, the second column in this grid. In Acumatica, you can take and you can remove those 10 columns as a user. Very simple. You can just go and drag it over, or you can go into the table screen and move it up and down wherever you want to put it. It's a role-based product. So you also have role-based where if you're an AP person, you're not necessarily going to see the AR module or the inventory module or some other a construction module or a project module unless you have that role attached to you. And Joel is going to show you a little bit of this. Joel, you can have this
I
one.
just figured to recap some things before we jump into sharing the product, which is probably what you're most interested in taking a look at. Is well, why would we consider Acumatica, and why did we look at this as a next step for our clients as they continue to move forward with their businesses? Is the accessibility being born in the cloud. Its foundation is there. It wasn't initially designed as a character-based to Windows-based, to then adding on elements that made it browser-based. But Acumatica was built in the cloud. We've already touched on the lack of infrastructure installation, which combines to that total access from anywhere. So the technology, which lets you pick the appropriate addition that best fits your business, all came together to make great sense for our clients. So with those couple points, we'll jump over and move into sharing some walkthroughs of the product. And as you have questions, please add them in the chat, and Jen will get those together for us and help us with those as we get toward the end. And again, this is your session. Please pull the questions together as you have them, and Jen can get them in place for us to take a look at. So I've now moved over to Acumatica, and you'll see I've logged into a browser. It's HTTPS from a secure perspective. And I may have multiple companies. They're actually called tenants in Acumatica. That's part of terminology and learning new things along the way. Even the old aspect of posting things, like Drew said. Acumatica uses the word release. So that's that point where our release is like our post, taking something from pencil and etching it into stone or an ink. So I need another transaction with an audit trail to support those kind of changes. Within Acumatica as well, you may have multiple, I mentioned, companies within a tenant, and even branches, self-balancing or not, within what's called a company. I have my credentials. I'm using what's called a native user versus Active Directory, like I mentioned earlier. I'll go ahead and sign in. And I want to share with you a couple things you'll find consistently along the way in Acumatica is what it remembers where I was at the last time. I had this open yesterday or the earlier before. I have this user defaulted to a dashboard. While I typically like to see 8 to 10 objects on a dashboard, this has a whole lot more. It's an example from Acumatica. It looks at things both from a receivables perspective and a payables perspective, as well as some information about cash and some summary information about the GL activity. Each of these panels, or in technical terms, Acumatica would call them a widget, are configurable and defined by user. And they also support drill down. So I can move from a dashboard to perhaps a listing, to underlying source documents, to then perform an action. And even the diagrams, the charts, are drillable, if that's such a word, into their supporting detail. So want to share that with you, that the user can have a default dashboard. They might have no dashboard as a default. They can also access and get to multiple dashboards. Sure, I'll take advantage of multiple tabs on a workbook. And what to share with you today is some aspects around fewer clicks or fewer windows popping up and fewer bouncing around through things. I mentioned even the company. As I logged into our tenants here, we see we have, in essence, in this structure, 3 companies, 2 of which each have 2 branches that, again, as I mentioned, may require balancing and may not. So we have the ability to directly within one login, not have to change companies to see what's happening in services or capital or services west, as an example. So that quick access to pieces, if you're moving around and forgetting what was that thing I was checking on, I have it all right here and available to me. The other aspect you'll see throughout Acumatica is this concept of, they're called workspaces, modules, for us as we think about the SL world. And a workspace such as payable in Acumatica pulls out a side menu of forms. Being creatures of habit, or as we look at things we leverage most often, you'll see that there's an option to show all or show these few things. These are the most common options someone can use. But if I show all, depending on my permissions, I can see more and more forms. I can also personalize this. Drew mentioned the columns, which I'll show you on we'll use an AP bill for that. But as we look at that, the user can also decide what items they want visible on the show all or show less. For example, in my case, I may want I can click a little gear button, and I can decide that I would like to see the checks, printing, payments, and I want to see non-stock items. And I'll exit that. And now when I show less, those items are now visible in my personalized workspace, if you will. That can also be managed centrally to make those other things visible to users. I may choose and move things up and down in here, have the things that I want most relevant for me. So you'll find this aspect of forms, which in an Acumatica's world, form is a data entry screen like a vendor or a bill. It might be an inquiry screen, or it might be a report. This is the AP agent. I'm going to take us into the build and adjustments area. And you'll see many times in Acumatica, when we're looking at transactions or master records, such as vendors, or in this case, AP build and adjustments, vouchers, as we would think about in the SL world. We have what's called a listing, a primary list in Acumatica terminology. And in our case, we've configured these to have what are called side panels. Our ability to look at a document or a row here and see something that is on hold in the middle, I can do a couple things. I can click a side panel and I can see that bill there. I'll take a moment and share with you details of what that form looks like. If I move down the row, the bill actually changes and I can see the next one. So the side panel becomes context sensitive. I may be curious about this vendor overall and be interested in what our overall balance is with the vendor. and I can look at what are called the vendor details. Make this a little bigger. And I can see we have 2 open invoices with that supplier. If I really wanted to move away from just an inquiry and run a report like the old days, I could actually run the AP aging report. In this situation, I have it detailed and limited to that vendor. So I'd actually run the AP aging report for that vendor right here. I could choose to send that to someone. I could print it. I could send that to Excel or to a PDF, all within this one panel. Now I'll use some expand and collapse options here to move that to the side so I can see more of this listing. And both within the data entry grid, as Drew described, or within even these listings, we have a column chooser. So that aspect of personalizing Acumatica without a programmer, without an IT department, I can come in here and indicate that, I would like to see what branch this is for. Let me move that over here. I'd like that first. I'm going to move that all the way up to the top. And I'll go past the notes. I'll stick it right there. And I see these other columns out here. I may not be working in construction or other pieces. I might hide the retainage pieces. But I do want to see this last modified by and when. Whose fingerprints are on the murder weapon? I'm going to click OK. And my grid has now changed. And that's personal to me. I scroll to the right and I can see these couple other columns added out here. We also see the branch listed here. I happen to have access to all the branches, so I see stuff for the wholesale group and the services East team. Depending on your permissions, someone may see fewer records. That personalization, again, was down to me. If I have permission, and I think I know best, I could actually share that column layout and push it out to everyone else. In that case, whether that's Drew or Jen, they could further personalize it after that, but I can at least set that standard of what I want our team to work with and go through. One other aspect you'll find throughout Acumatica in the data entry grids is the ability to further personalize and have filters. I may be able to look at this list that has all of our documents and 3,000 plus vouchers out here. I just want to see the open one. Well, I could come to a column in Acumatica and say, let me search here and just clear all. Let me pick what's open, click OK. There's only 82 of them. I would get tired of needing to do that every day or do that often. I'm going to, I'll clear that out here. Please select all again. Take a longer one. See, notice this funnel option here we have, where I can define a similar type condition. I may indicate here, I'm going to go where the status equals open and save that. I'll creatively call it open. Also, depending on my permission level, I could be selfish and keep it to myself. I can share this. And by permission to make a global filter, I've now hit save. Apply that. We now have a new tab up top with just those 82 open ones. I don't need to remember to filter a column or do this or that. I can come right here and look at the open items straight away. A couple other areas that you'll find throughout the Acumatica application where I'm looking at bills here. If I'm looking at projects, I'm looking at vendors, customers, sales analysis data. We do have the option to build pivot tables. There's an option to save your data as a pivot table. I have an example here in between that I've shared right here. This particular pivot table is structured to show by branch, by vendor, by year. You may decide, by date, I really just want to see last year and this year. And I can use variables. Say, let me go to the year start. I'll say -1. And I'll make that to today. I could say to year end, I'll just say today. That'll always move. So this is providing 22 and 23. As we move into next month, this listing would change to be 23 and 24. I don't need to program things. I don't need to change things. I define that as a variable that pulls that data together. If you're familiar with pivot tables in Excel, that ability to collapse things. So I may see just in summary, that far left column, I'll expand everything and see the vendor name, and I have this structure to be by year and by month. I'm curious what makes up those numbers. As we're used to working in hyperlinks and web browsers, taking advantage of that functionality and that technology, I can double click on that, and it takes me to a listing of the detail that makes up that amount. I've not used a programmer, not used a developer, taking advantage of the standard tools within Acumatica to make that usable and helpful for anyone doing analysis or review of those areas. Let's take a look at an actual form. I'll open up this bill in the middle. So it caught my eye in the middle, it's on hold. And a change in Acumatica from our SO world is we're not doing things in batch processing. So each document is its own batch at the end of the day. And the status, stat I, a document goes through, include on hold, because I'm still working on it, which can be a default. I take it off hold and it may move to called balanced, meaning I'm ready to get released or posted. If I have permission, I can post it, release it in Acumatica terms. If not, someone else may look at the list of all the balanced documents and release them. Document may also move to pending approval. This is an example of one where it is set to pending approval. Before I do that, I'm going to share with you some aspects of Acumatica. A summary area, not unlike a voucher screen in SL, and tabs, where we have detail. Unlimited lines, as Drew mentioned, that can be personalized. It may be an environment where I don't record individual discounts from my vendors here. I'll hide that column. I'll leave quantities and items out there, but there may be elements that I really don't need the description of the GL account because I know my account numbers so well. For me, I'll leave it there. However, I don't want to have to stop at a tab stop at that field. I want to make that not a tab stop. I'll make the account and sub-account not tab stops. I can click into them if I want to, but I've now personalized this where as I work through a form and tab through things, it will move straight past. If I needed to change it, I can click in there and work on it, but I can really streamline my data entry to be very quick and move through things. I can hit the down arrow and move to a new line. In my case, I won't save that. We do have a number of actions within Acumatica, not only at the line item, but you'll find a document, which I'll touch on in a moment. I can save my changes. I can actually hit remove hold and save and remove hold at the same time. One less click, a lot less to do. I remove the hold. In this case, my document says pending approval. Well, why is that? And if I look at the approvals tab, I can see, oh, it's because of our AP bill multi-line approval that by department, finance expenses are going over to Layla. I can save this. And I do have another browser open where I am logged in as Layla. And Layla was over looking at a bill, I think, earlier as well. If I look at her setup, Layla works predominantly in AP, so her default dashboard is an AP clerk. And she can see there's a document to approve. She can click here, and it will take her to the approval screen in Acumatica, and she can see, oh, I have this one to approve. She can open it up, review it, approve it. She many times may have also received an email notification with a hyperlink that would take her to the document or to a screen. In Layla's case, in this time and expense area, there's an option called approval. Now note I've got a star here. Just like the menus can be limited from a show all to show less, being creatures of habit, being used to working in our browsers with our favorites, we can mark screens as a favorite. In Layla's case, she does 90% of her work in these three things. She doesn't even think about workspaces or anything else. She comes here, clicks approval, and that takes her to the long list of everything she needs to do. She may also be part of a group that has other items to do, and if she may approve in someone's stead. If there's either or situation where Layla or Max could approve something, Layla can jump in and do that. Now, in this case, she can double click and open this. She could approve from right here. I'll have her open it to do a proper piece of looking at it, seeing what this is for, In her case, she goes, "Hey, what is this for?" "Oh, look, there's a file. And there's an attachment. Oh, there's a receipt. That amount doesn't match. I might reject this." Now, that's out there as an example. But the options here to have unlimited documents attached to a transaction like this, to a vendor, compliance areas, I'm attaching W-9s, I'm attaching lien waivers, attaching certificate of insurance to those vendors, so we have that data in one place. I'm not looking through SharePoint folders or Box or something else. Got them directly attached to that vendor or, in this case, transaction I'm working with. Layla may realize, yeah, that's okay. I'm not going to reject this. I'll go ahead and approve that. Note now that status goes to balanced. There's been no accounting impact yet. Layla has permission to release this, as would, in my case, the admin user that I logged in. I'll have Layla go ahead and release that, and I'll drag her out of it. Actually, before I do that, I'll go back to her dashboard here, as that's getting processed, and we'll see if I'll refresh everything for her. Many times either set to either refresh every 5 minutes, every 30 minutes, whatever it might be. Note there's no more documents to approve, and the AP balance is now updated for that $100 bill that's in the current bucket. That is real time. I'm not running reports. I'm not looking elsewhere. It's as current as we are. So I'm going to drag Layla out of the way here, come back to my admin user, and as I refresh this form, I can see that that is now open and eligible to be paid. Well, typically we may go through a bulk process of by a payment method, selecting who's going to get paid. You do have the option to pay it right from here. If I were doing this via wire ACE or other process, typically, again, if I'm paying by check, I'm doing a check run. I would include it in that kind of process. Now, one of the areas Drew has talked about the zero check in SL. I can't see faces to see if anyone's rolling their eyes or shaking their head, but the question of, if I really want to match these things up, how would I do that? Now, I've got a debit memo, debit adjustment, as Acumatica would call it, from the vendor saying, yep, we don't actually owe this anymore. I have a couple choices. I can create a debit memo from scratch, pick the vendor, put in the GL distribution, figure what I want to do with that. Or in this case, I can come to that actual source document and I can indicate that, you know what, I'm going to reverse this whole thing. Now I only have one GL line, but if I had 5, 10, 50, 100 lines in this transaction, it would bring all of them over for me. And I can see in my details tab, it brought it over. It's going to credit this expense account, debit payable. I can hit save, remove hold, and not only then release that, but I can also directly say that I want to match that up to that individual bill. There are a couple of differences that Acumatica uses between receivables and payables. On the customer side of things, there's a reverse and apply, matches them up straight away. On the payable side, Acumatica has recognized that there can be variability. We may have already paid that. It may actually relate to something else. Might apply to a different piece. I'm going to pick apply. And as I pull that together, I'm presented into this is a payments and application screen. How am I going to settle or satisfy that particular bill? And I can indicate I want to go at the bill. Yep, I'll add that one from today, that back on the 1st, that invoice such and such. I'm going to apply $100 of this to that. And when I save and release this, the debit adjustment becomes closed. And if I look back at that bill that we processed earlier today, the individual document here from ZZZ Insurance, we can see that its amount is 100, balance is 0. It was satisfied by not a check, but in this case, a debit adjustment that got a process here, and that is now closed. That document is done. So I wanted to share that aspect of simplicity in navigation, the 0. I don't have to process a check. If I did leave the two of them out there, I could choose to have the check process match them up. And the payment, a check payment could have indicated I have bill 1, voucher, bill 2, bill 3, debit adjustment, and the net amount paid. So those are many options that you have, and that's the flexibility Acumatica brings to the table for.